Alright, so I was on YouTube the other day and I saw this guy, Thomas Van Opstal. He was demoing a bunch of other stuff, but in it, he was in his studio and he showed that he has a Game Boy mic. He made a microphone out of an old Game Boy. And I want to try to do that because I think it'd be fun and I've never done it before. So let's try to make a mic out of a Game Boy. First things first, I need to get a Game Boy, which I have one. It's a Game Boy Color. It still works. So the first thing I'm going to do is take out the game cartridge, and I'm gonna remove the batteries. There are these tiny little screws that we're gonna need to remove. And these screws aren't actually small little screws, they're actually small little 3-winged screws. So you might need to, I got this kit with iFixit. I fixed my wife's iPhone recently, but it has a Y000, and I think that's what we're gonna need to take them off. Your mileage might vary if you do not have a bunch of random tools you have collected from fixing computers and things over the years. Voila, came apart. So this is the back. This is just, we don't need this. So right there is the speaker, I think. And we're gonna remove these 2 little wires from it, and we're gonna solder on 2 new wires from a cable that I am definitely going to irreparably do something to. So, okay, I found a cable. I haven't decided if I'm gonna take off the right angle one or the straight one. Basically I need to strip this cable and then solder it to the speaker. Here I'm basically cutting off one end of this 1/4-inch cable and then pulling back the wiring, stripping it, and separating the braided wire that wraps around the insulated wire. This is something I ended up having to do over and over again to get the amount of exposed wire correct. Now I'm seeing if I'm going to take off the headphone jack. I ended up leaving the headphone jack and just deciding to notch a little hole in the other side of the Game Boy cover. Here I'm using a little bit of heat and just removing the old speaker wires because we're not going to need those, but I did leave them in place. Now all that's left is soldering on the cable that we exposed earlier, and this was the tricky part. Like I said, you had to get just enough where the wire was exposed and you could solder it on, and there was enough to do that, but not so much that they were going to touch and short out, which, foreshadowing, that ended up happening. The other thing that makes this delicate is right where you're soldering these wires is where the 2 Game Boy covers come together. So you really have to get the right amount of wire exposed, but not too much so they short out, and then also get a good enough connection where they're not going to pull out right where that cover comes together. So here I'm just tinning up the wire, getting it ready to solder on, and then we solder it on and you're kind of hopefully done. Check, 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 1, 2. Oh, check, check, 1, 2. It's working. Check. Hey, check, check, 1, 2. Okay, the issue now is that it's shorting out because there's not enough exposed wire and they're too intertwined together, so I'm very close, but I'm gonna redo it so that it continues to work. Alright, so this is how the Game Boy mic sounds when I talk into it. You have to be like kind of right up on it, which is weird. Like if I talk over here, or if I talk over here, like if you talk not directly into it, it just kind of doesn't sound that great. But this is the Game Boy, and the Game Boy actually still works. Like you can turn it on and everything, there's just no sound. So let's hear how it sounds with drums.